Welcome back, everybody. Today is going to be another one of those episodes where we're going to fix up, clean up a bunch of stuff, and implement the little things, right? So hopefully I'm not going to drag it out for too long. Timestamps for everything that we're going to cover in the description. Go ahead, take a look at it, use it to your advantage, but let's go ahead and get started. So without diving into too deep for my decisions, as I said, the models were still malleable and I was probably going to change them. Temporal model, stupid name. Let's not be too creative. Call it the base model. All right. It is the base model. What we're going to do is we're going to give it a T key, right? And I'm going to say that type key, put it here. So we can choose what type of key we want on the model. Slug model, get it out of here. It was a stupid decision. I don't like it. For the base model, for the version model, for now we'll keep the version model as I think it might be reused because we already have the version migration context that works based on the version model, so we'll keep it. We'll give it an integer type of ID. Next thing into the moderation, let's just go ahead and copy this actually because I'm going to be using it to copy paste it and fix stuff up quite quickly. Moderation item, base model, integer, review, base model, integer, category, we are gonna revert back to using a string, and this is no longer going to be a version model. So I've taken the decision to not version categories and difficulties. I thought it would just be in terms of general interest. I don't really think people would care about categories or IDs. A trick is the real juice for the trickers to know the history of or whatever, right? So there is that. That is why I'm no longer versioning those. Comments, integer, difficulty, string. Again, we're going to be using the ID as the slug. And for the category, again, that's going to be the slug. Submission, integer, trick, inherit from version model. That's about it. For the trick category ID is now going to be a string. Same as before, we'll need to fix some stuff up, right? User, it is going to be a string. By the way, don't do what I did here. That wouldn't have worked anyway. We'll remove it. Video. And yeah, this is an integer as well. So all of those are integers. Let me close all the windows. I will collapse this, open the API. Go into the program first, and here we're gonna fix a bunch of stuff in terms of these things that are happening here. So if you have it laid out here on like one line, like so, and actually we forgot the slug on the trick, so let's go back to the trick real quick, copy this and add the slug here, close it, and there it is, right? What we're gonna do here is, or what you can do is select maybe about this much, Control-Shift-Alt-J, and then Alt-Shift-Insert. That will put you in insert mode. And again, select all of this, Shift down. You can select a bunch of columns, and there you go. Next thing with the comma, again, select all of this stuff with Control-Alt-Shift-J. This is an IntelliJ thing. Exit the column selection mode because otherwise it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable to use the IDE. Next thing, just replace the IDs back, undo the damage that we did, right? And I think that's it for the seeds. Another thing that I actually want to add here is something that we're going to be using later, is a user. So at the moment, basically when we register the user, you have to basically log in first and then get redirected for the user to be properly initialized when we get it through the profile. I actually want to go ahead and seed that user profile, and in here, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be adding a new user, and here for the ID, we will have the test user ID, we have the username, a test user username, and another thing that I will have here is the image. So what I've gone ahead and done in my www root folder, I've put a user.jpg image in there. So what I will do is I'll go to one of the submissions, copy the URL, pop it in for the image of the user, not forget the quotes, and for the name, I'll just put user JPEG. And this is just something for what we're going to cover later on in this tutorial. So you will need this. So make sure you have seeding, you seeded a user and you've added a test image, right? So this image is of my, what I consider pretty face. So yeah, get a good picture of yourself. Come on, man. Right. Fix the seeds, add the user seed, time to fix the controller, right? Category controller first, we no longer have the slug, we're working based off the ID. This is back to a string. Probably gonna fix it, or make stuff a little bit more convenient on the UI. When we create, we want to be setting the ID. I believe it's gonna be a lot of the same stuff for the difficulty as well. So set the ID here, no longer working off of the slug. Set the ID in the tricks controller. Let's see. So for the category here, in the categories, let's go ahead on the trick form. We're going to be setting the string. So when we are going to be creating the trick, when we select categories from the dropdown, those are no longer going to have integer IDs. Those are just going to be the slugs, right? But the ID property should remain the same. It's going to be a string now instead of integer, right? But JavaScript doesn't care because it's dynamic, right? Anyway, I think this is it, right? So all the errors are gone. We can actually go ahead, fire up the UI and go ahead and take a look at what it says, right? So let's go ahead and give it a refresh. Stuff is still loading. Let's go start fixing some stuff up. So what do I want to do? I want to change the way that we set up the initialization data. So at the moment it's sitting in the tricks.js store, and I don't like how it's implemented right now. So all of these getters, let's go ahead and remove them. And in the direction that we're going, it's just, I think this approach will be a little bit better, because we are sort of working with indexing data, so we're going to be searching a lot. We need to map related data and stuff like that. So let's go ahead, mark the fetch tricks as not asynchronous, because this hasn't been very efficient, because we were making a call, awaiting, making the next call, awaiting, and we want to make all three calls at the same time. So let's just grab promise all, and in here what we need to do is we need to pass an array of tasks. So let's go ahead, just cut the task, put it here, remove the semicolon, put the comma, grab the task, put it up there, replace the comma, and do the same thing up here as well, right? So here we got three tasks. All of them are going to be executed at the same time. We want to remove this try catch block from here. We no longer need it. In terms of the state itself, what we're going to be loading in here are a dictionary essentially, and let's also create a list. So list, right? Or rather lists and dictionaries, because there's going to be a bunch of dictionaries and a bunch of lists, right? So for these, let's go ahead, put these here and here. For these ones, we're going to pop them as null while they're not initialized. They should always be initialized on the server side though. Okay, so what's going to happen here? Essentially, at the moment, we just had a bunch of lists of, an unstructured list. So it's just a list of some data. Imagine if there is like 3 people, Anton, Bob, and Foo, and we want to grab Foo, right? We would have to check the first person, the second person, and the third person. If we kind of had a little index table in front of us that said Foo is in row 3, and then we go to row 3. So I'm essentially going to do that and create dictionaries of exactly that for the tricks categories and difficulties. So if I ever need to retrieve one of them, I'm not searching through a list. I already have a dictionary ready, which is just you supply an ID and you get that specific thing that you need. So this is going to change a couple of things. The main thing is how we set the data. So instead of setting all of this data sort of in one go, we are now going to be setting it separately. So let's go ahead, copy this a couple of times and just make sure that we are going to be setting this separately. I know state categories and state difficulties doesn't really exist. This is just to kind of keep the refactoring bit all the same, right? So we know what we're going to be changing. So for the set tricks, when we set the tricks, when we load this, we're going to have a then, we're going to have a bunch of tricks where we want to commit. We want to set the tricks. Don't forget to make this an object and pass the tricks into here, okay? The same thing is going to happen for difficulties and categories, so make sure we just rename this for once we actually put these into objects, they're going to be matching to these names, right? Remove the rest of this stuff. All right, so just like that. So what is going to happen when I set the tricks? What I want to do is I actually want to initialize this. So first of all, let's go ahead and say state dictionaries, and for the tricks, let's go ahead and initialize the dictionary. And then for the tricks, for each trick that I do, or for each trick that I have, what I want to do is I want to set it into this dictionary with its ID, right? So ID is like a specific version of the trick. So that's going to be there. So if I need to grab the trick by an identifier, I can do that by just setting the trick into this dictionary at the key of the ID. I can do the same for the slug as well, right? So that's basically, if I supply an ID or a slug to this dictionary, I'm gonna get the trick that I want. Also for the front page where we have the lists, we can go ahead and set, or rather push the trick onto there, right? So more or less, this is the operation that's going to be happening. I think this is actually not that needed, so I'm actually going to remove that. I think by the ID, it's not a necessity, I think. Same thing that we'll need to do for these. Let's go ahead and identify some common patterns between these, because all we're going to be doing is replacing some variables. So as you usually do, you create a function that will do something like set entities, and you will need to pass some data into here and perform some kind of operation. So we are performing everything on the state, so let's go ahead and get the state in here. The next thing, dictionaries and list, we can access that through the state. There is going to be some kind of payload, so we're going to be passing some kind of data in that we can iterate over. And then it's just the name of the thing that's going to be changing, so we can just supply a type or something like that. We can copy this, put this in here, and now just pretty much say iterate over the data. The X stays the type. Well, that's the thing that we want to be accessing on each list or dictionary, right? So just replace the navigation to the individual attribute of the object with the type, and we're going to be basically navigating to it dynamically now. Format that, and yeah, set entities is pretty much what we're going to do. We're passing the state, the type is tricks, so that's the property that we navigate to, and the data that we're passing, right? So there it is, copy it, put it there, copy it again, put it for the categories. Just make sure that you replace the tricks with the categories, the difficulties with the tricks with the difficulties for the difficulties. And yeah, so that's that. You can see here writers telling me these are not called, so I forgot to change the commits on here, so that's very nice of it. If it's sliding off the screen a little bit, but no. So this is pretty much it. So I guess slowly scroll over it if you need to copy anything. So anytime that we want to grab anything from the dictionary, right? If we want to grab a specific thing, we import the dictionary and we grab it as if we were using one of those getters, okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at the first thing where we're going to be using this. Let's go to the index page. On here, we have a bunch of stuff. First of all, let's go ahead and just remove this API thing and these methods on the front page. We're not using. I don't want them there. The first thing that we had here is we're actually using the lists, right? So we were using one of these ones, and it's just to display some kind of dummy data or something at our front page, right? I'm still thinking about how that's gonna look. So just grab the lists, pop them here, and I think everything in here stays pretty much the same. We can still use the slug here as well. So save that. Let's refresh the front page, make sure we're not getting any other errors. Good. Next thing, let's try to navigate to a trick. You see we have a vuex error, so we're referencing something unknown, and then there's a bunch of other errors, right? So next thing, let's go to the trick. Let's figure out what we got here. Let me just okay, yeah, so we did map state. Okay. All right, we have map state for the tricks, map getters, all the getters we got rid of. For this stuff here, let's just I can't spell dictionaries. Let's just pop this here. I'm thinking about this. Might be a little bit painful, but let's rename it to dictionary. So I'll get a little menu like this. What do we want to rename? Let's go ahead and take a look. So here we see dictionaries, type and set entities. So what we want to do is there's gonna be a include, right? So we can use the insert button to include in the refactor. So we're gonna be saying include these things. We actually want to change them, right? So if they're crossed out here, they're not gonna get refactored. If they're included, they're gonna get refactored. So do the refactor. Stuff is gonna get renamed. Right, good. Back on the trick where we got the dictionary, and this is where we want to do the referencing. So in the list of categories, we're gonna have a bunch of slugs. So this is gonna become a little bit more intuitive. For all the slugs of categories that we have, just please go into the dictionary for all the categories and just grab us the category that we need, right? And we just do it through the slug like this, right? And with the prerequisites and progressions, pretty much the same thing, right? So let's just go ahead and copy this thing. So from this trick, let's just grab the prerequisites. So this trick is going to have a bunch of prerequisites. All of them are going to be IDs, I think. So let's just you know what, tricks view model. Where do we have view models, trick view model, and here, yeah. So these are all going to be IDs. So trick is going to be the only situation where we're actually gonna have an ID. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have an if statement where xid, if we have an ID on here on the x, let's go ahead and make sure that we add it, right? So it doesn't need to be too performant. This is an initialization process. Again, if there's going to be any problems with performance, we can take care of it later. So now what this is going to do is this is going to put a trick index with an ID, which is what we will be able to use. So coming back here, a little bit messy, but this trick has a list of prerequisites. A list of prerequisites at the moment is a list of IDs of tricks, okay? Because they point to specific versions of tricks, right? Prerequisites, and we have a specific ID. So from this dictionary, we want to go into tricks and grab a specific trick. The rest of the stuff can go. Duplicate it or copy the line, go to the next line here, replace prerequisites with progressions, and that should pretty much be it for the tricks. We can actually start putting IDs for the category. The slug doesn't exist anymore, so we have to watch out here. Let's actually go into the index bit as well, and that's because I remember that slugs were being used here. So I think if we go back on here and I will inspect the link, right, you can see that we have a bunch of undefined here. So what's gonna happen? We want to start using IDs for the keys, and in the factory we can just say that we're passing an item or an entity. Let's just go with an I. So we're passing some kind of item. For the trick, we can use the slug, and for the rest we can use the IDs, because essentially that's what they're going to be, right? So hopefully you can see this in the corner. For the trick I'm using the slug, for the rest I'm using IDs. And instead of the slug that's going into the route factory, I'm going to be passing the item itself. So if I take a look at the button now, I will be able to see the flip and other ones as well. So let's go ahead, close this. Let me just refresh this, see what that console error was about. So that was something else. Let's go back to the backflip and let's keep sorting out errors on the trick page. On the trick page here, where we were working through this example with a slug, so yeah, category doesn't have a slug anymore, so we can't use it anymore. What we wanted to take a look at next is where we're using this trick by ID, because we no longer have a trick ID. So I want to get some of this a notation of the ID and slug under control. So here we're actually going to be using a slug. So let's go ahead and rename it to slug. If we want to grab a specific trick, we do it the same. So we just put the trick slug here. Okay. For the difficulty by ID, again, this is going to be just like that. Difficulties, and we can just supply the difficulty here, right? Because for difficulty, it's going to be the idea. Let me just double check. Okay, so this is the other way around. So as I said, so I'm a little bit confused here because we're using IDs for categories, and the difficulty and categories IDs are actually slugs, right? But they are IDs. All entities have IDs, right? It's just the, what's it called? Only the trick is going to have the slug. Okay. Next thing. We are now passing the slug here. We're binding it to the trick ID here. Let's go ahead and just take a look at this. This submission store, I am not a big fan of it. I will leave it alone for now because I didn't have any plans to refactor it, but we will just leave it like this for now. Let's go ahead and give it a refresh. We get a runtime error, so something's going wrong. Maybe there's an error on the back end. Nope. So let's just take a look at what endpoint we're hitting. We're going to the tricks. We're going to be passing in a slug, and we're going to be getting a bunch of submissions. So let's go ahead into the tricks controller, where we have list submissions for tricks. Actually looks all right to me. Let's take a look at the error. Oh, cannot read property 1 of undefined and view 71. So let's take a look at what happened here. So we don't actually have a trick per se. We have tricks, I think. Yeah, so we have tricks. Let's go ahead, save the two, give this a refresh. Okay, and there we go. So no errors in the console. Submissions are being displayed. Before we didn't have the categories and prerequisites. They're being displayed now. If I click on them, that lets me navigate. Categories and difficulties are probably still broken, as we can see. More or less working. One thing is I want to fix up the spacing here on this button while we're here. So on this divider here, margin bottom, I think I wanted to set it to 2. So yeah, so now it's equal space between the two. So once it's working, don't touch it. Otherwise, you never know what's going to happen. Right. Navigate to the transition. Everything's broken. Give it a refresh. Make sure that everything is broken. Good. Close everything like that, and let's just navigate to the category. More or less same spiel. Status, state, map state, dictionary, right? Navigate to it. Make sure you're grabbing the correct thing. Category ID. This is the category ID. We're going to be going to this dictionary. We're going to be grabbing a bunch of categories and then grabbing this. So you can see how we're grabbing the category, the tricks for the category. I think I'm going to be doing the same thing with submissions, unless I'm going to be introducing some kind of caching, but I think we're going to take a more simpler approach. Let's also go into imports real quick and just remove this unused import here. I think this is it. Let's give this a refresh. Nope, this dictionary categories is not a function, but you're absolutely right, sir. It is a dictionary. It's not a function. Okay, so for the transition, we didn't have anything actually. So let's go into the flip and make sure that we're getting the tricks, and we are. So that is fine. Let's go into the difficulties. Again, we're missing a bunch of stuff in here. Let's just grab a couple of difficulties in here. Same thing as in the categories. I can just actually copy this function here, pop it here, delete it. We got the dictionary, remove the unused import, Control- to hide that. And again, difficulties, just make sure that we're not calling it as a function anymore, otherwise the ID is going to be like, what are you, stupid or something? Right, that's there. Let's give this a refresh. I don't think, were we displaying any tricks for this the way that we were doing it in the category? I think we were. Let's find some. Okay, so easy, yeah. So we're getting the tricks and we're displaying the information for the difficulty. Now, let's go back and we'll move on to the next thing now. So this is kind of, not kind of, it is working. So we get navigation between tricks and stuff like that. So next thing that I want to take a look at is some validation on the login side. So on the front end here, right? When we register, or if we basically do something like input an incorrect password for the user, there is nothing. You don't get anything. You're never gonna know, right? So we want to try to display some of this stuff. So let's go ahead, go into the create account, because we're gonna get a few more errors here. So if I do something like test.test.com, validation errors, no problem, we get those. So the real thing is if I actually input correct stuff, and because the test user is taken, again, we don't get any errors. So I want to go ahead and take care of that. Let's go ahead again, close all of these windows. We are going to register, start with the register CS page. So here where we do on post, where we have the create user results. I'm going to go ahead and open my Solution Explorer. I'm going to go into the API, into the pages, and I'm just going to create a class, and I'm going to call it a base page. All right, because I'm just going to go a little bit, just going to create an abstraction, right? I'm just, because the login page is should have more or less the same functionality as the register page in terms of displaying the error. So this is why I'm adding this here. So this is going to inherit from the base page. So why did I actually create it? Because on here, what I want to do is I want to have an I list of strings, and just make this a new list of strings and rename it. So these are going to be custom errors. Error. There we go. I don't know. Could not remember how errors look like, but anyway, custom errors. Not gonna bore you too much because we still have a couple of stuff that we want to go through. Essentially, what we will have is for every error in the create user result, right? There's gonna be a couple of errors, so we are just gonna have an error. What we want to do is for the custom errors. Let's just go ahead and add the description, which is going to basically just describe what the error is, and that's fine. So then we're gonna just go ahead, display the page, and everything's hunky-dory, right? Just copy this bit, quickly open up the login CS HTML CS. Again, if here's gonna be the same story, but with the sign-in result, right? So if there's gonna be some kind of, actually, it's going to be a little bit different here, because we don't want to tell the user why the login was invalid, so you can't deduce how to hack around it. So let's inherit from base page so we can access custom errors. Here we're just going to say invalid login attempt. Try again, please. Or please try again, right? So yeah, just display this kind of error. So we're just setting it at the moment. We're not displaying anything. Let's go back onto the register page. We are going to open up the HTML for this. And for this one, I will actually just put it at the top. So let's go ahead and just put an if statement here, model custom errors dot count if we have more than 0. let's just go ahead, create a div. We're gonna have a class field, so we do get all that margin stuff. And then for each error in the custom errors, what did I want to? Oh, I just want a div. I just want a new line, right? And I'll just give it a class of error. And where we were on the layout page, where we were displaying where we had the CSS for the error, I'm just gonna add a class of error here and put a comma. So we're just sharing the CSS, right? So it's no longer just inside the field. It's also if you have an error class, right, applied to something. So what this will allow me to do on the page is, yeah, just put an error class here and actually just print the error in the div. So we're just gonna have a list of errors or everything that occurred on the attempt to register, right? Not sure what that is. Get it out of there if you also had that thing. Just copy this on the login CS HTML or the login CS or not the layout, the login page above the button. That's where I've decided to put it here. Format the file a little bit, but yeah, we're only ever going to have one if it's ever going to be there, so I've decided to just put it there. That is fine. Let's go ahead and check out what this looks like. So on the register page, I'm just going to give it a refresh. There you can see how the errors look like. We can maybe make it look a little bit prettier. So on the layout where we have the dot error, let's go ahead and give it a little bit of a margin on the bottom, and we can say something like 2 pixels, right? So if we give this a refresh, they should just have a little bit more space between them, okay? Just makes it that much easier, right? So now if you register, first it's the model validation, and then if we try to log in to this user, you can see that the stuff's already taken. And on here, if we try to log in as a test with an invalid password, so invalid login attempt, please try again later, right? So, and then we're gonna actually log in and everything's fine. All right. Another thing that I want to take care of, first of all, right now, just a quick intermission, a little break, right? Let's just go into the video editing background service because we're not gonna get another chance to do it, I don't think. But file manager local, let's just rename it to file manager, right? Because it's an file manager. Let's rename it, right? Just didn't name it correctly, right? What are you gonna do? Just rename the thing, right? Now, the next thing. So what happens when we log in, right? So let's log out. If I go into the backflip, if I log in, test password, log in, you can see I end up on the front page. So what I want to do is I actually want to return the user to where they started. So the way that I'm going to achieve this is by putting the location in the, what's it called, in the local storage. So if we type in a location in the browser, here you can see we can get the path name. So pretty much where we want to go to after we redirect, right? So we just, anytime that we try to log in, just store it. And once we're back, get it from the local storage. Pretty simple, right? I mean, it is. So Control-Shift-F, search for sign-in redirect, look for directory if you're using Writer, otherwise look for where we're going to be using it. So first usage is in the auth store, second usage is on the default layout, that is, that button, press and you sign in, right? So what we want to do is we want to create a wrapper around this, and before we call this function, we want to store the current location. So let's go to the auth store. In here, let's go ahead and create we are using login, we are being consistent. All right, and on here, we're going to return, and let me just pop up this menu again. I will just grab this function. So this auth sign redirect, we can only, forgot the dot there. We can only do this on the client side, so let's just put that guard just in case. I don't know how on the server side it can sign in. Stuff can happen. Put the guard there. So in here, let's just grab local storage and let's set the item. So that's before we log in. We want to go ahead and say post login redirect path, right? Copy this. And the thing that we want to store is, again, the thing that I just showed you in the browser is location.pathname. Okay, make sure you grab the key. We are going to go to our, I can't remember what it was, the sign in callback, right, in the static folder. So I typed in static to reach this. You can see we're just dropping to the slash. No good, no good. Local storage dot get item, pass the key in here, just like that. So return URL or return path. So copy this, a little bit of turning our operation. If we have it, pop us there. If we don't have it, pop to the slash. So just be a little safe, defensive programming, right? Right. And now we just have to utilize this login functionality. So in the off store, this is where we've been using it here. So what we want to do is get a dispatch in here. And then we want to dispatch login here, right? Remove that. And if we're logging in through here, that's what we're doing. Next thing is on the default. So wherever we had the button of sign in redirect, we actually have a bunch of computer properties, but this is an action. So we will need to map actions just like that. Same module is auth. And the thing that we want to do is log in. Again, same as always, and make sure that you can navigate so you know you're getting the correct thing. And just pop this here, okay? So here we are on the login, on the backflip. Let's go ahead and log out. So probably want to make it work both ways as well. I've only planned to do it for the first one, so I think we will only do it for we'll cover the other one later. So test password, sign in, get redirected to tricks.js, right? Chill. So another thing, if we reload, you can see we're getting a bunch of console logs in terms of who the user is, where we're getting him from, and this is basically all coming from auth.js. So if you still want these console logs, feel free to leave them here. I'm going to get rid of them. A bunch of all of these console logs here. Yeah, don't want them. Right. And yeah, so I'm just thinking about the logout bit if I want to implement it. So I'm thinking I don't want to implement it. Let's say you're on your profile and you sign out, and then if you try to navigate to a page that you're not authorized to, we redirect you back to, so you've signed out and you go back to the login again. It's kind of like, I think I'll just redirect back to the homepage. So if you sign out, just go to the homepage, okay? I think that is reasonable, okay? Now, for the last bit, this is more of a quality of life implementation. What I want to take a look at is displaying the user that is posting the submission, right? So you can see we have a bunch of submissions here. Who posted it? It's all about identifying, knowing who it is, right? So let's go ahead and display a little bit header, just like how you have it on Instagram or any other basically social media site. Who is actually posting this content, right? So let's go ahead into the web client, onto the pages where we had a specific trick, and let's just take a look here, right? So this is our submission. Let's first of all go ahead into components, and let's go ahead and create a new view component, and we will call it a user header, right? In the user header, we want a couple of information. Mainly, let's just start with the props, and we'll just have an image and the username. Okay, so image URL, right? Required false. We don't really require it, because if you haven't supplied an image, if it's empty, if you haven't set an image for your profile, it's empty. We might have a default icon to point to, but we'll take a look, right? We'll figure. We'll think about it. But for now, we'll just set required to false. The type, if we are passing it, is going to be a string. It's going to be URL. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. Username. Let's just get this thing in here. Required false. Required is actually false. Yeah. We might want to just display the image. We might not want to display the username for whatever reason. I don't know. The next thing is size. So just being able to control the size, because we're going to be using some Viewify elements. I found it before in my experiences. Could be quite useful. So again, required false, type string. Yeah, just set it to string and provide a default here of something like 42. And you should be fine here. Set those there. Get a div in here. Right. So what is this going to look like? We will need a deflex, so this will need to be a flex box. We'll just quickly align center. I just know that we're going to need that. So it's going to be a row. It's going to start with a v avatar. Actually, no, never mind. In the v avatar, I will need an image. And as a src for this image, we will need to bind the image URL on here. Size, this is where we bind the size as well, actually. Next thing, I think just put a div here, and we can say something like username here and vif username. And otherwise, just make sure that we're using a vspacer, so it is pushed to the side most of the time, unless we want to put something else there. But this is pretty much how you want it to look. For now, I think this is fine. Where we had the submission on the top here, so we're just gonna put this in here and then extract the submission as well, right? So user header, let's put this here. We don't have any slots, so we don't need to pass anything in there. On the submission, there should be a user with a username. We don't have that there yet. So let's check if we have some kind of a view model. Let's see, view models. We don't have it. So let's go ahead and figure this one out. So submission view models. Replace the trick with the submission. Right. For the trick itself, submissions. Cool. Delete a bunch of stuff that isn't related to submissions. So just rename the class submission view model to match the file name. Open submissions, and yeah, we're just gonna see what we need to extract, right? What do we got here? So we got the ID, which is that there. Trick ID, if we remember it, that's a foreign key, right? We got the description. What else do we want? Video processed. I think that's more for the backend if we actually want to fetch this record or not. Video, I think this is the part that we want. So video link and thumbnail link. So on here, let's go ahead, video and thumbnail link. Let's just call it thumb equals, and for the video link, we'll call it video here as well, right? Other things on the submission, we got the user, right? So I think same thing with the user, although we're going to be grabbing the username, and there was the user image. Yeah, and I wanted to put it in a new object. This might be its own projection later on. For now, this is fine. So I don't think we need this. Just select the properties, format the file a little bit, and there it is, right? So we're on the tricks page. It's a little bit wonky here, but what we want to do is we want to actually use this view model. So let's go to the tricks controller. And where we list the submissions for the trick, yeah, I think this is it. So we are going to select, this is going to be submissions view models. We just grab the projection and just make sure that we're returning an object. All right, cool. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. Let's just go and make sure that we fix everything up. So for the video player, that doesn't look correct. Let's just do this because I think we're passing an object here. What I'm going to do here straight away is I'm just going to put a thumb here. Thumb. We're going to be extracting the thumb from the submission itself. Let's go into the video player, and yeah, we are passing an object here. Let's just copy it, put a comma, make sure we're passing the thumb. Just have the string here and the string here, and let's just use here, remove the navigation. So video link, thumb link, that doesn't sound nice. Just use thumb and video, okay? Looks fine to me now. In terms of the username, let's grab this thing here and the image. So the actual thing that we're binding here is image URL, right? And there it is. Let's go ahead and see what this looks like. So refresh this so you can see my image need a little bit padding. So I don't know if you can see this. I have a little bit of a light reflection. So yeah, let's just add a little bit of padding. I feel like it needs a little bit of padding on here. Padding all 2. There it is. So you can see the name is a little bit too close. So let's just on here, margin left. I think 3 is fine. Yep. So offset it. There you go. Your social media cards with the content, with the videos. Pretty much built YouTube here, right? Not even close though. So don't start dreaming. All right, anyway, so those are the headers for the submissions. Let's go ahead and extract the submissions into their own component and reuse them on the profile page where we actually show the submissions as well, right? So back into the Solution Explorer, let's create another view component. Let's call it submissions or submission, all right? Let's close everything except for the trick here. Grab the card. Let's go ahead, copy it and comment this out so we know what to replace. We put the card here. V4 is no longer going to be here. The key, we will no longer need the key on here either. The actual submission component will need the key. We can remove this key from here as well. For the props, the type is going to be an object, and didn't actually give it a name, so submission, that's what we're gonna need. Put it in here, and type object, and was it required? Yeah, will be true. All right, and the comma on the end. So we will need a couple of components, so just the good old trusty way, user and video player. Let's just get these 2 components in here, import, and there they go. Next thing is this s dot. So that is how you can select it. So again, this Ctrl-Alt-J, select all occurrences if you want to try to see if that keybind is in your IDE as well. But here, let's go ahead and just type in submission dot. And this should fix all occurrences, right? Because you renamed them. There is our submission component. Now what we want to do is we want to go back into the trick and we want to add this submission component. All right, it can be self-closing. We don't need to put too much stuff in here. Let's go ahead, grab the v4 loop, make sure that the submission that we bind is this submission. And for the key, I think, yeah, that can be pretty much it. I don't think we will need the slug because the ID for the submissions is going to be pretty much unique. The trick here, we can get rid of it. I think this div here can go as well. format this a little bit. Let's copy this submission, and the other place that I can remember that we were using this is on the profile. So on the profile here, yeah, again, this thing here, just put the submissions in here. Just type this out one time, submission, make sure that it's imported. Video player, we don't need to use that anymore. Remove the video player from there. On the trick component, I think we can remove the user header and the video player components as well. Map getters, we can remove that. Imports, let's go ahead, clean that up. And I think that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. So flip, there we go. Let's log in and take a look at the profile as well. So we will go into profile here, and we are gonna get a big error. Cannot read property username of null. Let's give this a refresh, and otherwise, let's go ahead and take a look at why the username is null. So, or username of null. So let's just second close this, go into the network, and wherever we're getting the submissions. So right there, did I just see that the first one is a 204? Okay, I messed that up. Waterfall, I think. Yeah, so 204, that might be a status check, whatever. So let's see what we get here. And user is null. So where are we getting this from? User submissions. So on the user controller, let's go ahead and see where we get the submissions. So, I mean, pretty much the same thing. Let's go ahead and full hipster mode. We will return the submissions where we have a select submission submission view models, and we want to grab the projection. Make sure we're returning a list of objects, and one thing is the include of videos here. Let me double check on the tricks controller. We don't actually include the user. I'm a little bit surprised that the image is displayed there. So let's just make sure that we include the user here and include the user here as well. So that's that. Let's go ahead. We'll need to log in again. So let's just give this a refresh. Yep. So test password. See the profile, and there we go. An image that we can change. These images, I don't think they will reactively change if we change this image, only upon the next refresh. But nevertheless, the reused component for the submissions here and the submissions on other pages, pretty much. So this will be it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, subscribe, tell me in the comments. If you have any questions, make sure to join my Discord channel. I do a bunch of updates there. I also stream on Wednesdays and Sundays. So if you're into that kind of thing, come and join. Otherwise, have a good day, and I'll see you in the next episode.